Earlier this season, we did The Parent Trap. Tonight, Willy Wonka and the Silver Ticket. Come take a tour of Dragonstone. Maybe get a dragon or meet a very cruel fate. And then, of course, a little Jurassic Park thrown in for good measure. Imagine if that T-Rex had stopped and asked Alan Grant if he wanted to team up. Although, let's be honest, if anyone's riding a T-Rex, it's Ian Malcolm. But all jokes aside, this was an absolutely incredible episode. The writing, I have to say for the last couple of episodes, which some of us have felt were slow, others have said, well, what about the quality of the writing, of the drama? And I haven't really felt it. But tonight, I thought the writing was top notch. So many quotable lines. This is, I think, across the board where this show should be. And I don't know about you, but I had tears in my eyes when Hugh claimed Vermithor. Or was that the other way around? So the theme of this episode, I think, is loyalty, but not just to others, to the system. As for the first time, Game of Thrones brings the small folk, regular citizens, into the story in a meaningful way. Not even small folk who've worked their way up a little bit, but like the bottom of the barrel, right? A blacksmith, some guy who just hangs out in a bar all the time. I think this is a really important change in the story. And by the way, when you're talking about loyalty in the small folk, it's an interesting question indeed for those of us who know how this story is going to progress. That's all I'll say. I'm going to be very careful about the spoilers from the books. I'm trying to walk the thin line, the fine line, because I know some of you don't want to know anything about what's coming up, and yet others who are watching this coverage want that to be brought up. So, as I said, again, I'm trying to walk that fine line in the middle. If you're going to do a book comment yourself down below, be sure to mark it as spoilers, because I know what some of you know what I'm talking about in terms of what I'm referencing for the future. All right, so anyway, clearly, nobody expects the small folk and none of the nobility here expect the small folk to actually play the Game of Thrones. At the most, they'll be pawns in the game. Because when Jace challenges his mother about letting small folk claim dragons, her response is that it's too dangerous for her to take on Vhagar, and does Jace want to do it? So basically, and sadly, like so many leaders before and after her, Rhaenyra is looking for cannon fodder. Ooh. And also to activate her arsenal. Yes, all the dragons are now operational. It's taken her pretty much the entire season. And I think you can maybe look back and to give the show the benefit of the doubt and say, well, maybe this was intentional, this pacing, to make us feel as frustrated as Rhaenyra does, and to get as frustrated with the nobility, because you're like, you guys are not fun to follow. Let's bring in these small folk who are definitely, I think, a shot in the arm to the show and the war. So maybe that was all planned, but I still think they could have done the pacing a little bit better. But Rhaenyra has finally activated all of her nukes and is hoping, much like nuclear warfare itself, that the mere threat of dragon warfare will be enough of a deterrent to end this war. Aemond even turns Vhagar around when he sees how many dragons Rhaenyra now has. But that Vhagar, she is a bitch. She wants to choose violence. And she'll get there because this is Game of Thrones. So I don't think Aemond is going to choose peace. I think he's going to regroup. And as we just heard this episode, his brother Darren's dragon, Tessarion, remember who's blue and has a blue flame, has just taken wing, which means that Aemond will be able to add new weapons, so to speak, to this war as well. But as for this show, it will be taking a short dragon break now until season 3, because at San Diego Comic-Con this weekend, where they aired this episode in advance for those in attendance of the panel, showrunner Ryan Condal confirmed that this, in addition to Rook's Rest, were the 2 VFX-heavy sequences that they had planned for this season. I know that they have some budgetary concerns. That's why they went down from 10 to 8 episodes. But I hope that they go back to the leadership at Max and Warner Brothers, etc., and HBO, and they say, no matter what might be going on with the company financially, clearly they need 3 VFX-heavy sequences in a season. 2 is not enough. What do you think? I mean, the show is fantastic. I hope that the writing continues to be at this higher level. But even if it is, they still, I think, need 3 VFX-heavy sequences, particularly on a show called something to do with dragons, right? House of Dragons. I mean, we expect lots of dragons. I think that it's different for shows like Stranger Things, which are binge drops, so that it hits different. But when you have this week-to-week situation, you need 3. I think you need 3. Pacing is different. It's a double-edged sword. There are benefits to the binge and there are benefits to the weekly, but there are also, negatives to both as well. All right, so bastards, a fascinating subject when discussing loyalty, as one could argue that they have suffered greatly from a lack of loyalty, their rightful heritage denied as the ruling elite has had their way with the small folk and then walked away from the consequences, literally. Are the bastards eager to prove themselves, or perhaps have they learned the harsh, valuable lesson of the realities of the world all too well, and they are to be feared? Right now, even the most disloyal of the houses, Mysaria is like, I don't see, your half-brother's being that nice to you, Rhaenyra. But they're still playing by the rules of the Game of Thrones. They might be cheating a little bit. They might be on a different team now, but they're still playing by the rules. How will the small folk play this game? Will they might decide to play a different game. It is a dangerous thing that Rhaenyra is doing here. They have no grand houses or legacies at stake. They have no skin in the game or blood in the game. They are truly playing for themselves. We learn that Hugh Hammer has indeed lost his daughter. She passed away. That's very sad. And Ulf White has no family, except for his pals at the bar. But speaking of families and legacies, while at first Jace seems like he's just being a stuck-up jerk, his dismay over letting small folk bastards claim dragons is actually rooted in sense on 2 fronts. So first off, he worries about his own future. As everyone knows, he's a bastard, the actual son of Harwin Strong, betrayed by his dark hair, which he mentions here. Rhaenyra, in fact, herself bitter about the whispers about her own sons behind their backs over the years, uses that to fuel her righteousness in this plan, that an army of bastards is karma to all who made her sons' lives so difficult and her own. But she's not a bastard herself. And Jace is like, I appreciate your concern and your camaraderie, but you're not actually in this situation, Rhaenyra. She is just as guilty of these actions as the others are who have created these bastards, which is fascinating. So Jace is like, I see this differently, Mom. If there are multiple bastards who can claim dragons, what then legit claim does he have to the throne as Rhaenyra's heir? And I thought that was an excellent point. I was like, ooh, oopsie. Then even beyond his own future, he worries about the future of House Targaryen. What a guy. If anyone can claim a dragon, then what makes their house special? That's been their calling card for centuries. These are excellent questions, and I find it fascinating that in all this talk of who should rule, who should take the throne, discussing bloodlines, etc., which is why the opening credits of season 1 were so spot on, but there's never any talk about who is simply a wise leader, a good person, man or woman, who the people will want to follow, from the nobility to the small folk. And I think Jace, by the way, has the makings of such a leader. And it's a shame that he finds himself in the situation that he does. I think he's a good person and a wise person, as he's proving. And he's still very early on. Well, the life expectancy is obviously medieval rules, but he and Oscar Tully, who we're going to talk about in a little bit, are wise beyond their years. And I think both wise and good men. Perhaps, though, the problem is this is not a democracy, it's a monarchy. And just as many monarchs have claimed that they are chosen by the Almighty, the Targaryens have long claimed that they are chosen to rule by the dragons, who, of course, many people regard as the gods. Although, again, this is, it really, it's so fascinating. I think it really, in many ways, reflects the conversations that we're even still having today. I was going to say that a little bit later, but I want to bring it up now. You fill in the blanks as to how it does, but I think it really definitely does. And I think that's amazing stuff. All right, so this is also why the Arthurian legend is so unique and I feel so popular and has such longevity. Arthur, as we all know, wasn't even a knight. He was a squire who pulled the sword Excalibur from the stone and therefore became king. Perhaps one of the earliest stories to follow the hero's journey as outlined by Joseph Campbell. Many stories, of course, you could even go so far back as to the Bible, let's say, to talk about the parallels to that formula. The hero's journey, yes, is proven time and time again to be powerful stuff. And maybe that's why Hugh and Ulf regular men being chosen by dragons is so moving and so different for Game of Thrones. Maybe that's why I had such a visceral reaction to these scenes, particularly the Hugh one. And I'm curious how you reacted. It really did bring tears to my eyes. I was like, this is incredible. All right, so before we get to them, though, I do want to say that this was the best work Emma D'Arcy has done as Rhaenyra. From the speech to the bastards, telling her guard to even stand back, to her interaction with Vermithor. This look from D'Arcy was fire. Boy, and damn, that's a big dragon. I love it. Perhaps, though, I think in many ways what's happening here is that Rhaenyra herself is finally coming into focus, finally forging her own path. It's a crazy one, but she really is backed into a corner. It was also hilarious, by the way, when she and all the other nobles, as soon as she'd made that grand speech, quickly ran to the back of the room because they'd seen how this had potentially gone down before. And they were right to be concerned. And I just thought that was really funny. Obviously it was sad as well, but I think there was a comedic element, at least at first, in addition. So, two very different meet-cute stories. At this point, we could have a When Harry Met Sally style montage of how all these riders and their dragons got together. That's so great. I would love to do that. That's so funny. But of course, the through line is that each time the dragons themselves made the choice. Hey, when you know, you know. So Hugh impressed Vermithor with his honor and valor, as he was not only willing to sacrifice himself to save that woman, but he refused to die a coward, demanding that Vermithor get on with it, right? That he was ready. And that, to me, was one of the most powerful elements. I think that's one of the reasons that sequence was so moving. Because Hugh, like so many of the small folk, had lived such a painful, difficult, unfair life. And that this potential ending just seemed like more of the same. Like, what a fitting ending to such a life. And I think you could see that in Hugh's face. He was like, man, of course this is the way it's going to go down. But all that, to the very end, he refused to be broken. He was like, I'm not going to be broken by this. Because Vermithor could have picked Hugh right away when they were all standing on the top there. But they had to have this exchange. Vermithor had to see what Hugh was made of. And he felt only then that he'd found his rider. Oh, I love it. It's beautiful. That's what they could talk about. It's like, at first, I didn't think anything about the guy. But then, But when it comes to Ulf and Silverwing, their meeting was literally a shitstorm. Ulf, who'd run for his life into the caverns of Dragonstone, I was like, oh, run into his dragon. I mean, we knew, if you follow the books, you knew who was going to get. I mean, even if you don't, those were the only two characters who'd shown up to Dragonstone that we'd followed to any degree on the show. Maybe it would have helped if they'd had one character we followed that didn't get picked, to kind of throw us off. But no, so we were like, well, I know the people who've had dialogue are going to get the call. Oh, by the way, that woman was just blonde. What was she doing there? I guess, obviously like Jace, the hair color doesn't always give it away. But I was like, you're not a platinum blonde, sweetie. I think you should maybe be a little bit more concerned. All right, so Ulf accidentally comes across Silverwing and also, like Jurassic Park, discovers a giant pile of poop. And then he steps in it. Right? And then he rolled around in it for some reason as he tried to run away. When he held his hands up, they were literally covered in poop. I'm not quite sure why Silverwing would choose a human covered in her own poop. Maybe it masked his scent. Maybe it made him seem familiar to her. Or maybe, like many women, he just made her laugh. I like that. The disparity of how Ulf rides a dragon to the nobility, what a great contrast. I think he was doing a drive-by of King's Landing to show his mates at the bar that he'd done it, because they'd encouraged him to go. He didn't want to go. They didn't even really encourage him. They were like, dude, you've talked so much shit, we've had to listen to it, you better go. And maybe that's why his meet cute went the way that it did. Also, steeped in shit. And then, however, I think obviously it was a good-natured situation, he created a bit of an international incident. Yep, Aemond sure was surprised, but he wouldn't have been if he hadn't decided to rule by fear. Because at the beginning of the episode, one of the council members tells Larys Strong, the Master of Whispers, that he'd heard a whisper that Seasmoke had a new rider. Strong is like, where'd you hear this? And it's not rock solid intel. And while they're discussing this, down below in the courtyard, Aemond is sending two members of the Kingsguard who were supposed to be protecting his mother and sister, Helena, mother/sister-in-law, during the riot, And also, by the way, those are also, as you might recall, two of Aegon's idiot friends that he'd appointed to the King's Guard. And Aemond isn't killing them. He's showing some mercy and sending them to the Wall. But anyway, Larys and this other dude don't want to go to the Wall or worse, so they decide not to offer up this sketchy rumor. But Otto Hightower would know you always want to hear every rumor, just in case. And Larys Strong, he didn't even look into the rumor to see if he could verify it. And I think that's because Aemond has made yet another mistake, and that is that I wouldn't say he so much made an enemy of Larys Strong, but he has made it clear that Larys has no future with him. And so Larys is like, I got to get Aegon back in here. So he's forcing the Grand Maester to hurry up Aegon's physical therapy to get him back in the Game of Thrones. Because Larys is like, this is my option. This is my only real option. Forward. But I gotta tell you, Aegon is still such a whiner. I don't know what Larys is going to be able to do with him, right? All right, speaking of Arthurian legend, Alicent pretty much took a camping trip into another show, giving off strong King Arthur vibes. From the colorful fantasy-like forest that she went into, I was like, where's this beautiful place been all along? To doing an excellent Lady of the Lake impression. Really, some very beautiful shots. I do wonder if this metaphor is perhaps intentional, because it was so spot on. Will Alicent help choose the new leadership in some regard? I'm curious as to why they decided to do this. But to me, what I found hilarious about this was that she went on this camping trip with just one guard, and no one seemed to notice that she was gone. How all the men in Alicent's life have not just abandoned her, but forgotten her. An important lesson, ladies. An important lesson. Perhaps that's why Rhaenyra is surrounding herself not just with dragons, but with women. Although, speaking of loyalty, while women might be a bit more loyal to her, it would be a mistake to think that they don't have their own games to play. Side note, we don't really have anything. I mean, obviously, Rhaena is running off to get that rogue dragon, but that Lady Jane, oh, she's sketchy as hell. All right, so, I mean, I would want a dragon in my corner if I were Rhaena, just for that reason alone. All right, so Mysaria is extremely helpful to Rhaenyra. But she is only concerned with winning this war. Mysaria doesn't care anything about the lasting legacy of House Targaryen. And like all small folk, I'm sure there is a part of Mysaria that would like to see the nobility done away with. Which is why I think Jace is right to be concerned, and why Rhaenyra is foolish to take all of her advice from one person. That's why you're supposed to have a council. Damn it, Corlys, get in this story. Yet again, he has little to offer, now the new hand of the queen. But thankfully, his bastard sons, more bastards, are finally stepping up in a major way. We really do have an army of bastards at our disposal. But yet again, so Adam, of course, is now a dragon rider, and I love how protective Seasmoke is of him. Oh, he's like, leave my boy alone. He's learning the ropes. I thought that was adorable. And although I gotta tell you, Adam did bend the knee awfully quickly. I'm like, I think it's, what's the right word? I think it's naivete. I think that Adam, and also that Adam is such a kind person. Let's see how long it takes this show to break him. But I think, and I think he was smart to do that, because obviously he otherwise would have had a big problem. But it did seem, I can understand why Rhaenyra was like, yeah, you seem a little distant. This seems a little bit too easy. I'm not going to fall for this. But I just think, again, it's Adam, it's naivete and being new to this. So anyway, Alan, I think hearing that his little brother is now going to be a major player and in danger has shaken Alan out of his hesitancy. If Adam isn't going to be safely on the sidelines anymore, then neither can his brother, his older brother, who is, as I said, very clearly very protective of Adam. I also love that Alan told Corlys that he is of Salton Sea and yearned for nothing else. The opposite of what Baela said a few episodes earlier. Yes, I do believe we have a winner to take over House Valyrian and Driftmark. Aw, Corlys was like, I love to hear it. Finally, someone isn't just all into dragons. Interestingly, while Hugh and Ulf are so far removed from nobility that they have no sense of it, Alan and Adam know that Corlys is their father, and Corlys knows that he is their father. Yet Alan and Adam are still willing to play by the rules of nobility. They don't out their father in public, and they don't put him on the spot even in private. It's two very different approaches. One is, do we tear down the nobility and build something new that's egalitarian, right, and democratic? Or do we find an entry point and make the system work for us? Again, as I said, these are fascinating discussions because they very much mirror a lot of the things that are even going on in the real world today. I loves it! Finally, Daemon. He's still hallucinating, but I think what's clearly his transformation, his own journey, is coming to an end. I can understand that, many of you argued that this was the case all along, that they're like, let Ryan Condal cook. He's going somewhere with this. But I think, sometimes when you lose audiences, no matter how strong the comeback is, you can't always get people to come back and see it. I hope that people do return and watch this amazing episode, and hopefully the final episode of the season is fantastic as well. But Damon's big scenes this week are with Oscar Tully, and Archie Barnes is incredibly impressive, able to hold his own opposite Matt Smith at just 18. Has Game of Thrones discovered another fantastic child actor a la Bella Ramsey? It takes Damon a minute to catch on, but yes, he's got to eat some humble pie and kill his faithful assassin if he wants the formidable Riverlands armies to fight for him, or at least Rhaenyra under his banner, right? Oscar Tully might not have a lot of experience, but clearly he's a natural as he powerfully and shrewdly steps into a leadership position. Hard to do when, as is pointed out, he's younger than many of the sons of the lords he's asking to follow him. When Daemon is forced to kill Wellum Blackwood, what a scene. Blackwood looks Daemon right in the eyes, and he's like, I've been faithful. And, Daemon's like, I know, buddy, but, what am I going to do? And it was just an incredible exchange. Quite different from when Ned Stark, for instance, had to carry out executions. And I think it underlines how Daemon is no Ned Stark. In fact, this is yet another bloodthirsty man that Daemon has taken advantage of to do dark things to move his own position forward. And both times the situation got horribly out of hand as the men that Daemon chooses end up being darker than Daemon had ever imagined. Afterwards, Daemon has another hallucination, hopefully his final hallucination, of Viserys in his final sickly form. And Viserys is talking about faithfulness, how he didn't want the crown, but took it out of faithfulness to the monarchy and to his house and legacy. Then Viserys asks the big question, does Daemon still want the crown? And Daemon does not answer. I think at Harrenhal, in addition to these hallucinations, Daemon has gotten the chance to try to be king and to see how it would go. And it has gone horribly. So I think this whole experience will affect not only his designs on the throne, but I also think how he feels about the small folk becoming dragon riders when he comes back. I think Daemon will have maybe a very positive reaction to that because Daemon has always gotten along with the small folk, from Mysaria to the Gold Cloaks. And let's be honest, what has the monarchy ever done for Daemon? So only one episode left this season, and they're not sending it out to the press in advance. So we'll all be surprised together next Sunday night. Until then, what did you think of this episode? Did you enjoy it as much as myself? And what did you think were the most powerful scenes? Share those thoughts down below, subscribe today, and of course, as always, you can check out some more videos right now.